potential dichotomy or through whether the two should overlap and to what degree they should overlap. And the first one, I'll switch over to the web page. So the first one is called Trending Seas. I don't know if any of you has seen it in the past. It's been created a few years ago by Valentina Di Filippo, who's an information designer. And this is beautiful. You look at it and it's a flower, right? A flower by definition is beautiful. Of course, this is a different type of flower in the sense that it's packed with data and is generated by using data. So what this shows is the trending tweets that had the hashtag #MeToo between October 2017 and March 2018. And you see here, we have a timeline right in the middle. And then each bubble has a few levels of data encoding. And there's more information on the side in regards to the legend, how the data is encoded. So one, the distance between the center here and the circle represents the number of retweets. Then the number of followers is encoded in the size of the circle. So the larger the circle, the larger the number of followers of the user. Then the likes is encoded in color. The warmer the color, the closer to pink, orange, the higher the number of likes. And then the comments are encoded in this purple circle or spiral. So the fuller the spiral, the more comments the tweet got. So that's the legend. And then you could literally hover over each bubble. One, you see a lot of information based on how the data is encoded, but then also you can actually see the tweet itself. And not only that, it also includes an element of scrollytelling, which means that as you scroll, the story develops. And the way the story develops is through a timeline. So as I scroll down here, it starts off with the center, which is the key portion of the timeline. And then at the bottom, you have the trend over time. And as I scroll down, key events start populating. So first, the birth of the hashtag, and then some context around it. And then as I scroll, Hollywood, the story started with Hollywood incidents, then the European Parliament and how they got involved, national security, Time Person of the Year that had to do with that, Oprah Winfrey, who gave a speech about that, Women's March, then Women's International Day, and then at the end you can explore further. So this is a visualization that's engaging, I think, but also beautiful at the same time. Then I have another one, which falls under beautiful. This is by Giorgia Lupi, who's also, just like Valentina De Filippo, an information designer. She combines art, even more so I would say than in the other visualization, with data visualization or with information visualization. So this visualization also has flowers, a different type of flower, and it's about bruises, and it's called The Data We Don't See. And the guiding factor for creating this visualization for her was the fact that clinical records don't really capture the impact of illness on family. And she had a friend whose child woke up in the morning bleeding. Of course, her friend was devastated, went through a very rough time, but clinical records are data points that don't capture that emotional impact. And she wanted to create a visualization that captures that emotional impact. And I mentioned that she combines art with data and with visualizations. Her visualization was actually also exposed at the Museum of Modern Art. So it was actually really large on a wall, displayed so that everyone can engage with the visualization. But I'll walk you through how the data is encoded. So it starts here, and you see it's not called the legend as we would call it, with the regular graph. It's called artwork structure. So it's closer to art. So each petal is a different day. So you can literally count the number of petals, and that means the number of days. Then every time there was a lab test, a new group of petals starts. For example, here there's a new one, here there's a new one, so on and so forth. Then the platelet counts from the lab tests are the big red bubbles. So this one's here. And then, to scroll down, you have these purple shades. Those are the intensity of the bruises. And of course, purple makes you think of bruises. And then there was the petechia on the skin, so disease that the child had on the skin, and those dots represent the number of spots on the skin. And then medications. So then you have these black lines that stand for medication. And then days when the mom was away, which are dots. And then positive moments in yellow, so another layer of color. And then level of fear versus level of hope, color-coded in this purple versus pink, just lines next to the flowers. So in the end, of course, this is a lot to read and a lot of data points and a lot of data encoding, but it's a video, and I'll play just the first few seconds of it to get an idea. And it goes on and on, basically from petal to petal, and the data starts populating, right? So those were two examples of data visualization that is beautiful. Now, this one could be beautiful depending on how you look at it. This one is, I would say, very controversial because it was featured in one of Edward Tufte's books, and Edward Tufte is, a very well-known, highly influential person in the world of data visualization, but it was featured and criticized, featured from a very negative standpoint. Now, this was created for Time magazine. The goal was to attract the reader's attention. If you, just display a regular line graph, probably readers won't really stop to pay much attention. If you display something that has an ornament next to it, in this case, a very prominent one, at least you capture the attention. Now, whether you do it in a positive way and you actually convey the meaning of the data, or you do it in a negative way and the meaning of the data, gets lost, that's a question that we can discuss and debate. And then this is, your typical dashboard, most likely, or in most cases, exploratory. You allow the user to make different selections and look at the data in different ways. But typically, the type of graphs are very common. Graphs that we commonly use, such as bar charts, line charts, or a map here. But this type of graph doesn't stand out as much as the beautiful ones. So then the question is, to what degree could or should beautiful versus professional data visualizations overlap? And I was thinking of a scenario where, let's say you have to give a presentation in front of an executive audience, and maybe they don't have a lot of time, and they say, hey, don't bring me a ton of charts, bring me the story. So then what do you do in that scenario? Do you have a few slides with charts, or do you think of maybe visualizing the data succinctly, using maybe more ornaments, or maybe a type of graph that's beautiful? And that's open to discussion.
Those are really interesting couple examples you showed up front there, Rebecca. I had not seen those. I mean, to me, a lot of this just it relates to who is your audience and what is your purpose. And we probably set up a false dichotomy here of saying beautiful versus professional. I think there is a beauty in being very in sort of clarity of expression, minimalism, getting your point across. There's I think you could consider that beautiful. I would consider that beautiful. If you created a very succinct way of being able to express an issue to an executive audience in a way that is sort of perfectly clear and they understood it and they absorbed it, there's sort of I would consider that beautiful in its own right. I struggle with those first two, even maybe calling them data visualization in this, they are visualizing data, but it seems like they're really much more about art. And certainly the second one, my ability to like track all the things that she was trying to show there. And even whether like, it didn't seem clear to me that it really was about showing that data. If it was more about showing the data or what was happening or something, you would elevate, you would prioritize how that data gets shown a little bit more than what she had done, where it really felt like the beauty of kind of how you took someone through that, especially as it animated, was far more important than showing what the data meant or what the experience even was. So in that sense, sort of like a data art, but it feels like a different class of thing. I don't know. How do you feel about those?
Well, I definitely wouldn't use any of the first two examples in a business setting. One, they are harder to decode. There's just a lot of layers of data that one would need to spend time just decoding the information. But in a more simple way, I think there might be opportunities if you're in a position where you need to attract the attention and maintain the attention, and maybe regular graph wouldn't quite do that, would convey the information accurately probably, but wouldn't really make the audience pause and think, wow, I would really want to spend 5 extra minutes analyzing this graph because it's so interesting. So I think it's a give and take. It's highly dependent on the audience, the context, the data that you have. I mean, again, definitely I wouldn't take it as far as showing something as complex as the first two examples in a business setting, but there might be opportunities to include visualizations that are, maybe somewhat more beautiful than just the regular graphs that we use. And I would say that minimalism and beauty can also go hand in hand, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in general, I think we overestimate our audience's willingness to spend time learning what the data means. I think Chris, you and I had that conversation.
Yes.
About like a dashboard.
Yes.
There's always valuable information, but you can't expect an executive to want to wrap their head around all that. Like they've got, and I'm sure we all feel this in, quarantine days, they're like, oh, our heads are so full of stuff that asking you to like, oh, wrap your head around all these pieces. We overestimate when we're presenting things that someone's going to want to parse multiple dimensions and kind of figure that out. And I think we also, but on the other hand, I think to your point, Rebecca, I want to disagree with you, but I can't, like, we underestimate the need to grab someone's attention and need to like do something that's a little bit, Patrick gets this because he's a marketer. You got to like do something to seize their attention so they'll go that next step and start to, you probably saw yesterday what Burger King did that was going too far in doing that. Did you see their tweet?
No,
I didn't see that one.
Don't even want to repeat it, but
Okay, I'll Google it,
controversial.
not because you're saying it, but because I'm curious. So completely disconnected from this, but I'll check it.
Well, they had a series of tweets, but the first one was women should be in the kitchen. I think something like this. And then they say, well, because there need to be more women who are chefs and they're underrepresented and stuff. So they basically are trying to grab people's attention with a sexist statement, and then sort of back, making their point after that. But so you don't want to do that. But on the other hand, when you're visualizing data, like having some, and it can be done with words, it can be done visually. but something that really pops for somebody that makes them go, oh, I want to learn more. You've only got sometimes like seconds to get people's attention. And I think the beauty, whether it's visual beauty or attention grabbing or cleverness, I mean, like being funny or clever is sometimes is good. It's a form of beauty. You know, there's an art
Yeah.
that I think can get people's attention. And that's sort of what you have to do. So yeah, there's the old Tufty. Tufty was very, or even more than that, Stephen Few, our friend Stephen Few is very just like, take the color out, make it just, it's all about the data. And I think that misses the point of that you have to engage your audience in some interesting way, bring something interesting to the show.
And I think that brings up an excellent point too. As a marketer and someone who has a degree in marketing and advertising, we were one of the first things you learn in your very first marketing class is you have literally within 6 to 10 seconds to grab somebody's attention, and that dictates if they're going to pay attention for the next 10 minutes. So with that in mind, which of the two, the more beautiful or the more professional, do you both lean towards the majority of the time, Zach and Rebecca?
I say both. I think you could achieve both. I would.
Okay.
I agree. I think there's a gradient. It's not an or, it's a and a gradient scale there.
I love that. I agree. Chris, do you have any questions?
Just a comment. I think you should try to make something as beautiful as you can, so long as it doesn't interfere with its purpose. Because especially with working at Nissan, we have a large Japanese influence on our culture, and the feedback I generally get when I'm updating a dashboard or a chart is take out anything that's not very traditional, exactly what they're expecting to see. So I would love to make some things more creatively. It's generally looked upon as a drawback. So the audience is important too.
Yeah, in the culture, yeah, definitely.
I
You
almost
brought
tore
up
the
a
company apart
graceful.
making a dashboard with dark mode. Like it was controversial, at least according to the people giving feedback. So
Yeah. That's
I
great.
love it. I love it. Well, we can go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is explanatory versus exploratory. What exactly is a data story? I came into this industry with no prior experience in data visualization or data storytelling, but just a wealth of knowledge in my short career on how to do things very well. So I was really exposed to the concept of data storytelling right as I entered my role here at Juice. So there's probably at least 100 different ways that we could define data storytelling and what exactly a data story is. I'm sure all four of us that are sitting on this call right now have a different definition of how we would define that specific term. So Zach, you've done a lot.
The only thing that matters is what I say, right?
You have a ton of information and you have a ton of ideas on this. So I'd love for you to share a couple of the slides that kind of explain what a data story is to you. And then we can hear from Rebecca on whether or not she agrees. And then we
can.
can.
Mind pulling those up, Patrick, because
Yeah, I got you. No problem.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a very interesting topic that I think has been a lot of chatter around it in the data visualization space. And I've tried to contribute to that some. And the reason I was framing this explanatory versus exploratory, I think we're talking about another scale, sort of range of ways things can be. And I think that part of what people are asking is like, we sort of know what exploratory analytics is, but how does a data story kind of fit into that spectrum, I think is part of what we're trying to sort out. So if you go to the next slide, share a couple of kind of ways that I've thought about this, and then I think I'm sort of maybe over time honing in on what I actually believe. So they're not all these slides don't kind of necessarily, they aren't internally consistent exactly, but they're different ways to think about it. One of the ways that we used to talk about this a lot was this question, are you herding cows or cats? Which was thinking about if you're working with data, if you're herding cats, you're sort of in this mode of this frantic mode of trying to figure things out. So you're not really hurting them per se. You're trying to kind of get the pieces together and understand what's going on. And that is what it feels like in exploratory analysis. Often you're worried about gathering data, pulling together new data sources. How does the data relate across data sources? You're trying to kind of find what's important in that data. What are the metrics that are going to matter for you in that data? And that's a very natural, often kind of the starting point of a lot of analytics that people do, is that sense of they're just kind of they're in the wilderness trying to find their way, sort of. Then there comes a time where you feel like there's more of you're more in this mode of explaining it to someone else, conveying the information and the insights that you found to your audience. So if you get to the point of presenting a dashboard or a report or a data story, I would argue you really should have gone through that exploratory analysis phase and really know what's important before you're presenting that to other people. And that's part of it, is you don't want to be putting the burden on those other people to figure out what is important, what they should be looking at. So the more clarity you have about where you're going and what your message is, the more you're kind of in this exploratory mode. Next slide, please. And then, the other sort of element in here as we start to, as we try to define what is a data story, is this contrast of what is a dashboard versus a data story. And the way I had shared this a little while ago of like, dashboards are this kind of collection, often kind of a collection of the most important pieces of data that people should be looking at, but without any sense of what is the flow and the how should someone work their way through that data or explore that data in a kind of guided way. So the scrolly telling stuff that Rebecca, you were showing is very much in the sense of like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to educate you and walk you by the hand through this process of how to look at this data and understand what it means and what some of the insights are. A dashboard is not trying to give that guided tour. It's really kind of putting everything out there and letting people figure it out or focus on the pieces that they care about. So where I've sort of gotten to ultimately, if you go to the next slide, is look, another Venn diagram. I didn't plan this, Rebecca, but the sense that there's this data exploration where you start and you're in search of insights at that point. It is often the work of an individual where someone is kind of doing that analysis on their own. So it's kind of a solitary activity. Whereas kind of way on the other side of the spectrum is data explanation, where you really have kind of one story to tell. And this is, think of this, you're standing up in front of a meeting and you have a set of slides and you're really trying to make a specific case. You have a fixed message and you're essentially, there's one-way communication. You're telling people what you found in the data. That's sort of this extreme of data explanation to me. And there's this middle area that I find most interesting, which is kind of a blend of the both, and that's where I want to situate data storytelling, is that you're guiding people through the data, but you're also giving them the flexibility to interact and explore and really have a dialogue with the audience. So it's not just telling somebody, it's having a conversation back and forth. So that first, the one with the flower that you shared, that sort of walks you through it if you scroll down the page, but it also is giving the user the opportunity to kind of find things that are interesting to them. So it's not just telling them. And that could have been presented as a static set of things, even if there were static visualizations, to walk someone through it, but it's giving a level of freedom and flexibility to the audience so that they can participate in the conversation. That's what I kind of think is the magic of data storytelling, if done well, is that it brings the author and the audience together in a conversation instead of just being kind of tossing the knowledge across to the audience.
Agreed. What about you,
Rebecca?
I first should start by saying that I really like your Venn diagram and how you labeled data exploration, which is solitary, data explanation, yeah, one-way communication. And so typically when I was thinking of data storytelling, I was thinking that, yeah, it could be a Venn diagram, but I was thinking it's more towards explanatory. So like 90% explanatory and the rest could be exploratory. Just because I think if you let the audience explore more than you explain, then they might end up with different stories. So you're not controlling the story anymore. You pretty much enable each audience or portion of the audience, groups of people to just go out and look for their own story. So I think it's also a question of how much you should control the data story and how much should your audience control the data story. And then is it still a data story if they control it more than you do or equally?
Yeah, I think
what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that control dimension is really important over in the left side of the explanatory. Or sometimes I've thought of data storytelling as data story finding, which is an awkward term, but essentially you're giving people a playground, a sandbox in which they can find the stories that are most relevant to them. We also talk about choose your own adventure books. So it's a little bit that sort of nature that each audience member brings their understanding and context to find what is most important to them. I think it's probably fair to say everything in the left circle is kind of a form of data storytelling, and that's sort of the interesting spectrum to me is what happens on the left there. We had, I don't know if you know, we may know of Nancy Duarte, who has done a bunch of things with data storytelling, but is a expert at presentations and storytelling, period. And her view is very much on the far left on fixing, like defining what you want to say and reinforcing that message. But that's not really the way it works that often out there in the real world. I feel like is often like I'm looking at marketing data. Well, that's changing all the time, and I need to have some flexibility, and I need to discover things together with my business partners. So I think that interactive data storytelling is kind of more often a useful tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the context and to your audience, right? Are you going to present this in a way where you're not, standing up presenting to 200 people or 300 people? Are you going to sit down on a Zoom call or WebEx and then kind of talk through the data points and kind of explore them together? Or, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to, stand up and present. So I think that's where that difference maybe comes from, thinking about the audience and the context. But I should say that I do disagree with something that you said earlier, and I know that Patrick will love that. I'm sure he's been waiting for this moment. No, but when you mentioned that dashboards are exploratory in nature, I actually disagree. I do think that most dashboards have been built to be exploratory and that most people use them in that way. But I do think that you could use white space and build the structure of the dashboard so that it does have a flow that could be a storytelling flow. for example, you could start with an intro that's grabbing the attention, and you leave a bit of space, and then maybe you present the first section of the data, and then maybe you leave a bit of space and you introduce the second section, and then maybe you have a call to action. So I think that yes, most of the times dashboards are used with an exploratory purpose in mind, but I think I've seen dashboards and there are use cases where they could be explanatory as well.
Yeah, I think it's, this is a little bit, reminds me of like genres of music or movies or something like that, where it's like, well, is that a, is it a movie? Is that a comedy or a drama? Or maybe it had, if I laughed in the middle of it, does that make it a dramedy? Like there's like trying to pigeonhole broadly what you need to deliver really does, like, it's not terribly useful to be like, we're going to create very specific buckets. I think it's when I think about dashboards, I think that most dashboards can benefit, even if they're like an operational dashboard that someone looks at every day. So you don't need like a lot of words and explanation built around everything. I think they could still benefit from some of the principles of storytelling, setting the context, helping people understand how different things relate to each other, driving people to some action as they're looking at the data. These are the things that we talk about with data storytelling, but it's not exclusively to like, it's not like, well, if you're doing a real-time operational dashboard, then there's nothing to learn from data storytelling. And if you're, wherever you are, I think there's sort of things you can learn or things you could pick up from other forms of what we call data products. Like there's different genres of data products, and you can apply lessons across them. All right, we got a little.
Love that. Any quick questions from me?
No, I was hoping for more aggression, maybe some contrived disagreements.
Like
I'd like to feel like I'm leaving here with seeing two people that have built a grudge during the course. No, this is great.
We're too reasonable.
Sorry to disappoint.
It seems like it's kind of this and or that, but no, it's very good. It's excellent. Thank you.
I warned Patrick that I was like, I'm not sure we're going to disagree, but we'll try.
I asked for them to, like, when they did disagree, to like maybe dramatize it up a little bit more. Like I wanted some like UFC Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey moments. But maybe we're gonna get that in this last section. I want to make sure we have plenty of time. We have about 13 or a little over 15 minutes to get into this last one. And I feel like this one is going to be the doozy, where we actually may get to some of those punching bag moments. And that is when we're discussing humans versus artificial intelligence, what exactly the future of data visualization is. Obviously, we all know that like AI is something that is literally just booming all around the world right now. The amount of times that I read the words artificial intelligence within my own industry of marketing is outrageous. And it's even more prevalent and pervasive, I feel, in the data visualization and data storytelling industry. So I'm going to keep this very short, sweet, and ask a very simple question to both you, Zach, and you, Rebecca. What is the future of data visualization? Is it human beings, or are we switching completely into something that you see will be artificial intelligence, where only slim numbers of people that specialize in AI will be actually working there? The floor is yours. Duke it out.
So I think Zach and I were talking that, I mean, we are not specialists in AI, or I can speak for myself. I'm not a specialist in AI, so I will preface everything that I'm going to say by highlighting that. Having said that, clearly we all hear about AI and we do work in data visualization. So inevitably we do spend some time thinking about how the tool will interact or will not interact. There was a quote that I heard a while back, and I can't remember who said it, but the person was saying that, well, in the future, we won't need any speedometers on cars, since cars will be, auto self-driven cars. So then why do you need to see what speed you're driving at, since the car is doing all the work? And then reversely, the thought is like, well, the same with data visualization. If AI is doing all the work, what's there for you to do? Well, I first think that cars will still need speedometers, even if it's a self-driving car. I would still want to know what the speed is, just to be aware of what I'm doing. Plus, AIs can fail as well sometimes. You don't want to be in that position. But overall, I would say that it's not an or question; it's more of an and. And I think that AI and data visualization could go hand in hand or should go hand in hand and should help each other. I think AI just can make our lives easier from a data perspective. We could get to the finished product from the perspective of having the charts quicker. We could, leverage AI to discover the patterns. Maybe through AI, we don't just get suggestions in terms of chart types. Maybe AI could suggest, colors to use, fonts to use, placements on a dashboard. I think those could be automated, and it's great. That would save us some time, but I think it would still not make anyone working in data visualization lose their jobs overnight. I think there's still a lot of room for contextualizing the findings. After all, there might be 3-4 patterns in the data, but each pattern might need to be delivered to a different audience in a different way. And that's where the human being and the human element, I think, comes into play. And then I think that reversely, if you work in AI, maybe you need to communicate your work to leadership, and maybe they don't fully understand how AI works, and then you need data visualization to explain how AI works and what AI can do to benefit the organization. So I think it's also a two-way street.
Yeah, I hate to agree with you on stuff. No, I think that's well said. The purpose of data visualization to me is to be a bridge from data that we can't as humans wrap our head around what's really going on and translate that into a form that is human understandable. And that's why I sometimes I wrestle a little bit even with data visualization, because if you can express what's in the data through other means beyond visualize a chart, that's also a way of bridging that gap to humans. So I think you alluded to, like, you have these AI models that are doing things. If we still want to stay in charge as the humans, and I think we can agree on this call that we do, that we want to understand what's going on there. I mean, and quite literally and practically, like, you're building these models, you want to understand how good those models are doing, what decisions they're making, kind of have visibility into what AI is doing for us. You're going to still want that same thing. So it's, in a lot of ways, it's changing. I think what you'll see is that instead of visualizing the raw data, what you're visualizing more and more is the results of models from AI. So I still want to be able to see the where we're tracking, but now I've got a predictive model that's going to tell me where our production is tracking or demand is tracking, and now I can see that. So it enhances what can be shown. I think there's sort of this. The question is kind of how do these two things play relative to each other? How will AI enhance data visualization? You're talking about, like, helping you choose the right chart or colors or that kind of stuff. I've been underwhelmed with some of the NLP kind of natural language stuff that exists around trying to, like, take data and then with AI present, like, summarize that data in ways that are that summarize it so that someone could just read what's in the data. From what I've seen there, it just hasn't felt like you're replacing the human very well yet. And then the other NLP kind of data visualization thing is the idea that maybe you don't need to visualize the data. I can just ask a question of my data I can speak into my Alexa and it's going to tell me the answers. And I've got all sorts of problems with that. That has not felt at all like a very useful model. And you always got to say yet, because you don't know, like, if the machines are getting 10 times smarter, every year, you're going to be like, well, a year from now, I'm going to sound pretty stupid because I was reflecting on what is currently available and now things are way smarter. But those don't feel very useful to me at this point.
As soon as you just said her name, mine turned on over here. So good thing I had myself muted just then. It's especially annoying because I have a friend with that name. So every time that I will say something to her, they all turn on because I have one in like every room. So any questions though there, Chris? I think that is such a fascinating discussion to have. Was hoping for a little bit more contention between the two of you, but that's all right. But any questions on that or on any other thing that we've covered?
Well, we don't want to put ourselves out of a job, either of us. I think we want.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus,
We want to
I
believe
think
that we're an important
if
part
there's
and humans need to stay.
if there's one element that will keep us in the loop as humans, it's that people generally like to have another person to blame. So I think that alone, that very human tendency will help. I guess my question is around, just kind of setting aside data viz, looking at data exploration. Because some of the things I'm most excited about is all the possibilities you can check using AI or even just a regular programming language and some models. So any thoughts on that piece where maybe the exploration moves away from humans to AI and humans get kind of shifted over more to the communication piece?
That feels more like an appropriate space for AI. Like, I mean, the idea that you're doing analysis and then trying to find outliers through that analysis, computers are better at that than us. Finding outliers, finding patterns. This was one area where I thought that even with visualization, I think a good application of AI to data visualization is to show the visualization, but also then highlight automatically what is interesting in that visualization. So we've seen a drop in this trend. Is that a statistically significant drop? And what is the implication of that? Like, be able to pull to the surface some of the interesting things that you're seeing there. And I do agree in the kind of exploration, finding what's important. I think there is more opportunity there for AI than the communication part, which I'd like to think is still strongly in the human court.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry to disappoint, but I do agree. I'm trying to disagree, but it's not quite working. No, I actually agree with Zach, and I think yes, the exploratory portion is easier to implement. One example that came to mind though, regarding the more storytelling aspect in AI, I remember a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Lexus created a commercial that was done entirely by AI. And an ad is, inherently storytelling, right? You want to tell a story about your brand or about your product. And it was entirely done by AI. The script itself was written by AI. And then, of course, they filmed with human beings. But I mean, you can Google the ad. I think the ad makes sense, but it looks so common, so similar to other ads that I've seen in the past that nothing really looks really interesting, or it doesn't really stand out, at least to me, in any way that would make me even curious to watch it again, or curious to go and buy a Lexus. It felt like it could be any other car, whether a luxury brand or a volume brand. And it just felt too similar to everything that I've seen in the past. So that just goes to say that yes, maybe some of the technology is here, but is the output exactly what we are looking for, or do we still need the human element when it comes to storytelling?
Oh, Becca, you put a perfect bow on this. We can go all the way back to your first point about beauty and grabbing attention, and you can't expect AI to do anything truly creative that's going to grab your audience's attention. So that is a place that we can strongly defend for a while.
I like it. AI is great at finding outliers, but not at creating outliers. Yeah, that's.
Exactly. Ooh,
Yes.
even better.
Love it. I actually,
I've twisted words, spun words before. Excuse me.
I actually remember that ad, Rebecca, and the uproar in my field over it, and just how much of a deciding factor it was for a lot of people that, you can try to automate this, you can try all this AI stuff, but without that human piece of creativity, it never is going to really fall exactly where you want it to. Well, that kind of concludes where we're all at now. If you got onto this a little bit late, we will have a recording of this put up this afternoon. So thank you for tuning in. I hope to have another debate and discussion where maybe things can be a little bit less civil. We may need to bring in stronger personalities. I'm just kidding, you guys.
Hey, now we might have a debate.
If you had a point system and maybe a winner, I think that's the key.
There we go. There we go. We'll make it a little bit more competitive next time. But thank you for tuning in, and thank you for being a part of this debate and discussion. And we will see you guys very soon again for another one.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all. Have a great
Bye.
one.
Bye.